The morning it all began, my coffee went cold before I even took a sip, because from the living room I heard my daughter-in-law's voice, sharp, angry, breaking the quiet. "Darling, your mom changed the password. I can't use her card anymore." That one line told me everything. Months of polite smiles, her fake "thank you, Mom" dinners. It had all been about that little piece of plastic in my purse. My son tried to calm her, but I heard every word through the wall. She called me selfish, said I was ruining their lifestyle. Imagine, at 68, after raising a man who once shared his last cookie with his mother, I became the villain for protecting my own money. I didn't shout. I didn't even move. I just looked at that card, the one they thought they owned, and smiled. Because this time, I wasn't the one who needed it. And before the sun went down, they would both learn exactly what else I had changed. I was holding my cane like a sword when I saw the men on my porch with tape measures. A white pickup idled along the curb, the kind contractors drive when they come to rip apart a kitchen. A laminated badge swung from the neck of the younger one. He waved as if I were a neighbor wandering through someone else's life. "Ma'am," he called, "we're just getting measurements for the inspector. You must be Miss Whitmore." "I am," I said, my voice steady, even though I was still getting my balance back after 6 weeks in a rehab facility for a new hip. "Can I ask why you're measuring my porch?" "Pre-demo photos," he said brightly, thumb hitching toward the front steps painted the pale blue my husband chose 35 years ago. "The buyers want to expand the entry and add a ramp on the east side before winter." "Buyers?" The word left my mouth like a cough. "What buyers?" A strange stillness slid over his face. He glanced at the older man beside him, then back to me. "The folks who closed on Friday. We're scheduled to start in 2 weeks. I figured you knew." I didn't feel my heart start pounding, but the porch boards tilted under my shoes. "There must be a mistake," I said. "This is my house." He looked at his clipboard, and for the first time I noticed the address. 412 Magnolia Street, Astoria, Oregon. My address. "We've got the deed recorded with the county, Miss Whitmore," he said, softer now. "I'm just here doing my job." A breeze came up from the river, carrying the tang of salt and wood smoke. Somewhere down on Commercial Street, a gull screamed. I tightened my grip on the cane. "I'll need your card," I said, "and the name of whoever sent you." He handed me a rectangle that smelled faintly of sawdust. Jacob Nash, Nash & Sons Construction. Beneath it, in handwriting, Buyer Rep, Redwood Meridian, LLC. A number with a Portland area code sat under that. "Please don't take this wrong," he said, "but you look a little pale. Do you want some water?" "I want you off my porch," I said, "now." They went down the steps fast, glancing back as if I might change my mind. When the truck pulled away, I sank onto the top step and pressed the business card into my palm so hard the corners bit my skin. The lilacs along the fence had gone wooden with late September, small brown pods rattling like teeth. I had been home less than an hour. The rehab center had sent me off with a paper bag of meds and a flyer about fall prevention. They had not included a chapter about strangers measuring the house you've slept in for 40 years. Inside, dust motes drifted in the slant of afternoon light through the front window. My house smelled like itself. Cedar floorboards, coffee grounds, lemon oil, the faint tang of turpentine from the studio at the back where canvases leaned like quiet guests. The blue mug I always use waited on the counter. The brass clock over the mantel ticked. I set my bag down and reached for the phone. My son answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said lightly, the way he always began when he wanted something from me. The sound of traffic bled through the line. "How's the new hip? You home already?" "What have you done?" I said. There was a pause as wide as the river. "What do you mean?" "2 men from a construction company were on my porch just now," I said, hearing the steadiness of my own voice and clinging to it. "They said the buyers closed on Friday. They said my house was sold." Another beat. Then a quick breath that told me he'd been waiting for this call since Friday. "Mom," he said, "please, don't get upset. You sold my house." "Okay, first. No one's trying to hurt you. You were in rehab. You were stressed. You said you didn't know if you could keep up with the stairs." I said the back steps needed a railing, I snapped. "Ethan, answer me plainly. Did you sell my house?" I facilitated a sale, he said, slipping into the voice he used with clients when he was proud of himself. He's a real estate broker. He knows how to shape a word until it looks like a favor. The market is peaking, Mom. You have all your equity trapped in a place that could be a safety hazard in winter. We talked about this. You signed documents before your surgery, remember? I went over everything with you. I signed insurance renewal forms, I said. The memory shot through me. 2 days before they wheeled me into an operating room, my son had put a neat stack of papers in front of me at the dining table. You told me you'd handle the insurance while I was in rehab. You told me not to worry. He exhaled. The paperwork included a transfer authorization, Mom. Don't be mad. This is good. It gives you options. We'll get you into somewhere single story, closer to town. We can set you up with a nest egg. Vanessa's been researching places with yoga and a ceramics studio. Vanessa, I said. Even saying her name felt like stepping on broken glass. Put me on speaker. What, Mom? Put me on speaker, Ethan. Silence, then a faint click and a swirl of background noise. She came in like perfume. Vanessa always sounded like she was posing for a photograph you couldn't see. Helen, she cooed. Welcome home. How's the hip, honey? You were there when he slid those papers in front of me, I said. You told me to sign fast before the pain meds wore off. You said it was just premium adjustments. Oh my God, she said gently. You're confused, and that's totally normal after anesthesia and being in a facility for 6 weeks. Remember how worried you were about falling? We talked about getting you somewhere with an elevator. Listen to me, I said, the words stacking like bricks. You will not step onto my porch. You will not walk into my yard. You will not touch my mailbox. You have until 5 o'clock to tell me where you hid my life, what you signed, what you forged, who you paid, and then I will call a lawyer. Mom, Ethan said, the word collapsing into a plea. Please don't do that. Don't make this adversarial. You're not thinking clearly. I have never in my life thought more clearly, I said. You sold my house. You did it while I was in a hospital gown. I will meet you with an attorney or I will not meet you at all. He stopped breathing again. I could feel Vanessa's eyes in the silence like 2 cold coins. Then this is what we're going to do, Vanessa said brightly, as if she were outlining a brunch plan. You are going to take a nap because you sound overtired, and when you wake up, you will realize we have moved you toward a safer, richer life. If you choose to make this ugly, that's on you. And Helen, do yourself a favor and don't call some random TV lawyer from a billboard. Ethan will send you a list of reputable firms who won't exploit an elderly woman in a vulnerable moment. The line went dead. I stood very still until the clock ticked exactly 3 times. My house hummed softly, the way houses do when the refrigerator is thinking about turning on. In the studio at the back, the last canvas I'd started before the surgery still leaned against the easel. It's a painting of the mouth of the Columbia, the way the morning light breaks open over the water and the pilings look like a row of old men's teeth. I started it the week before Ethan came over with the paper stack, when I still believed he carried my best interests like a candle. I picked up the phone again and called the person I call when my shoulders feel like concrete and the world tilts. Diane Lopez, who taught next door to me at Astoria High for 27 years. I'm on my way, she said before I finished the first sentence. While I waited, I made coffee because it was a thing I could do with my hands. Steam rose and I watched it as if it might spell out instructions. I stared at the kitchen table where I remembered Ethan's thumb on the edge of a blue folder, and the memory shifted into focus with a horrible click. He had slid one last sheet across the table at the end, impatient because Vanessa was double parked. This one's just a notary acknowledgement, he'd said. It shows you're you. It goes with the insurance update. We have to get it done before the rehab intake call. Mom, don't make a face. It's standard. I had been dizzy with fear about the surgery. He had kissed my temple. Vanessa had said gently, "We're your family. We're making it easier." I signed. The doorbell rang. The sound shuddered through the house. I shuffled to the door and opened it to my friend's face, the kind that makes you feel your ribs loosen. Diane didn't waste time on small talk. She's built like a willow and moves like someone used to pushing through crowded hallways. She set down a canvas tote bag heavy enough to be used as a weapon and folded me into a hug. "What did they do?" she asked into my shoulder. "Sold it," I said. "They sold my house." She pulled back and looked at me the way she looks at a student who insists he turned in a paper that doesn't exist. "No," she said. "They did something that looks like that. Those are different things." She took out a legal pad, uncapped a pen with her teeth, and sat me at the dining table, the same table, and said, "Tell me everything you remember." I told her about the contractors, about the business card with the Portland number. She wrote the numbers in her neat teacher print. I told her about the blue folder and the last sheet of paper. She put her pen down for that and went very still. "You signed a notary certificate," she said finally. "I did." "Did they bring a notary with them?" "No." "Did anyone check your ID?" "No." "Okay," she said. "That helps." Diane teaches art, but she should have been a detective. When she gets quiet, it isn't because she's lost. It's because she's 3 steps ahead, showing mercy to the slower minds around her. "We need the paper trail," she said. "Astoria is in Clatsop County. The recorder's office will have a copy of any deed that changed hands. We'll go there first. If we don't find it, we'll call the number on the card and let them talk themselves into a confession." "And a lawyer," I said. "We'll need a good one," she agreed, "but we don't call a lawyer with nothing in our pockets. We collect first." Diane drove because the thought of navigating commercial street traffic with my left hip fresh out of surgery made my skin prickle. We parked on Exchange, fed quarters into the meter because old Astoria insists on quarters, and walked slowly toward the courthouse, my cane clicking a rhythm I didn't want to learn. The recorder's office is a room that smells faintly of old paper and toner, with tidy rows of chairs and a counter where people bring their family messes and make them official. The woman behind the glass had a name tag that said Marisa, and a look that told me she had seen every human emotion pass across this counter twice. "I need to see the deed for 412 Magnolia," I said, resting my palm on the counter, as if I might steady the world. "Do you have your parcel number?" she asked. "Magnolia Street," Diane said, already pulling a folded sheet out of her tote. "Clatsop County GIS shows it as 70942. The deed would have recorded last Friday." Marissa typed. The screen reflected in her glasses, lines of small black text we couldn't read. She made a small sound in her throat when she found it. "Here," she said, and turned a monitor so we could see. The document was a PDF, the kind that looks bland until you read what it means. Quitclaim deed. Grantor Helen E. Whitmore, grantee Redwood Meridian, LLC. Consideration $10 and other good and valuable considerations. Legal description, a slab of numbers and letters that translates to the clapboard house with the dogwood tree out front and the porch where my husband had fixed a loose rail the summer before he died. Below it, a signature that looked like mine if my hand had a stranger's nervous system. Next to it, a notary seal. "May I have a copy?" I asked. My voice sounded polite, as if I were discussing a recipe, the way women are trained to sound even when the ground gives way. "You can request one," Marissa said. "It's 25 cents a page." "Print it," Diane said, "and the transfer affidavit and any associated filings." Marissa nodded and clicked. The printer on the back counter began its careful cough. She brought the papers to the glass, one hand on top to square the corners. "Do you know this notary?" she asked neutrally as she pointed. I leaned in. The notary stamp was crisp. The name was Carla Brooke. The commission number was there in neat black digits. I did not know a Carla Brooke. Diane took a pen from behind her ear, the way she used to do when she'd walk around a classroom reminding students to sign their work. She circled the notary's name. "Do you know if she's local?" she asked. Marissa looked thoughtful. "We could check the Secretary of State's database," she said, sounding mildly apologetic. "But we can't give out personal addresses." "We don't need her address," Diane said. "Just the status of her commission." While Marissa looked up the notary, I pressed my fingers lightly over the signature on the paper. The loops of the H and E were mine. The tail on the N reached too far, the way Ethan's hand would draw it when he signed notes for me in homeroom once upon a time. We teach our children to write their names. They learn ours. "She's in Portland," Marissa said. "Commission current, expires next spring." What date does she say she notarized this? Diane asked. August 28th, Marissa said, reading, at 3:45 p.m. I closed my eyes. On August 28th at 3:45 p.m., my physical therapist had been coaxing me into a slow bend of my knee while a daytime talk show murmured about a celebrity divorce. At 3:50 p.m., I had asked for an ice pack and a ginger ale. I had not been at a notary's office in Portland or anywhere else. Can I ask you something? Marissa said carefully. Yes. Would you like me to mark this file? She asked. Sometimes we put an internal note if there's a question of fraud. It doesn't change the record, not until a judge orders a correction, but it flags to staff that someone has contested it. Yes, I said. Please. Back outside, the sky had gone the particular gray of the coast when the day is thinking of rain. Diane held the papers like a talisman. She walked me slowly to the car. What now? I asked. Now we call the number on the card, she said. Then we call a lawyer. And then, Helen, if I know you at all, we go home and you make coffee, and I watch you begin to rebuild your life as if this is a still life you're painting, one object at a time. I didn't want coffee. I wanted my husband, who has been dead for 6 years. For the first time in months, the ache of his absence wasn't a dull companion. It had teeth again. We sat in Diane's car, the defrost fan a soft hum, and I dialed the number written in pencil. Redwood Meridian LLC. A man answered with the amused patience of someone who believes you're lucky to have reached him. This is Helen Whitmore, I said. I'm calling to clarify a misunderstanding about my house. He made a sound like a smile. Ah, Miss Whitmore, glad to connect. We're very excited about the Magnolia property. It has great bones. You purchased it using a forged notary certificate, I said. Return the keys to the agent who gave them to you, unwind whatever you filed with the county, and refund any money you've advanced to my son. If you do that, we can all pretend we never met. He chuckled. Ma'am, I appreciate that you have strong feelings, but this was a clean transaction. The deed is recorded. The purchase price has been paid. Your representative, who do you think my representative is? Your son, he said easily. Ethan, he was the listing agent for the transaction. He will not handle anything for me again, I said. And you should consult your counsel about what happens to deeds established on forged notarial acknowledgments. Have a nice day. I hung up. Diane was smiling at me the way she smiled when a student who'd been too timid to speak finally presented a portfolio and broke everyone's heart. Now we call a lawyer, she said. I know someone. You do? She nodded. He's retired, which is why I trust him. He doesn't need the money or the fight. His name is Tom Everett. He and his wife used to come to the Arts Center openings. She passed 3 years ago. He consults on elder and property cases because he can't stop rescuing people. Rescuing people, the phrase made my throat close. Diane made the call because I didn't trust my voice. She explained who I was and what had happened. She listened, then hung up and turned to me. His office is on Duane, above the bookstore, she said. He can see you at 4. At 4 o'clock, I climbed the stairs over Lucy's books one careful step at a time, my hand on the worn banister polished by decades of readers. A bell chimed softly when Dana in the front office opened the door. She had a small ceramic whale on her desk and a warmth that felt like a quilt. She led us into a room with tall windows and case files stacked in neat towers. Plants thrived in the light, their leaves glossy, tucked into old mugs and a blue watering can that had once belonged to someone who loved their kitchen. Tom Everett stood when we came in. He is the kind of man who looks like a lighthouse keeper, broad-shouldered, silver hair cut neatly, the sort of face that has watched a lot of storms and refuses to be impressed. His tie was loosened, and there was a smudge of soil on his sleeve. Miss Whitmore, he said, and his voice was the human version of a steady beam. Please sit wherever your hip is happiest. Dana brought ginger cookies because I told her we're going to need sugar. We sat. Diane placed the stack of printed documents on his desk as if she were offering a sacrament. Tom glanced at them, then looked at me, not at the papers. Tell me everything in your own words, he said. Then we'll talk about what the papers say. I told him about the porch and the tape measures, and about Ethan's voice turning into something I didn't recognize. I told him about Vanessa's honeyed calm and the notary's stamp that said a Portland stranger watched me sign something while I lay on a table in Astoria with a physical therapist counting slowly to 10. Tom listened hard and took almost no notes. When I was finished, he turned the printed deed toward him and read it. He tapped the notary's seal with his forefinger, then the date and time. "Okay," he said. "First, we're going to put a temporary hold on anything else happening to your property. There is a tool called a lis pendens. It tells the world, including this LLC, that a lawsuit about the title is pending. You don't have to file the full suit before we do that. We just need to show you have a legitimate dispute. I will also file for a temporary restraining order to keep anyone from attempting to remove you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been keeping like a coin under my tongue. "Second," he continued, "we will notify the district attorney's office that you suspect forgery and notarial misconduct. They may or may not bring criminal charges. That is not our focus now. Our focus is to get your title back and your life quiet." "And the notary?" I asked, pointing at the black circle of ink. "Carla Brooke. Dana will confirm her status and request her journal for that day," he said. "All notaries in Oregon have to keep one with time, Idaho type and signature. If she's a real notary, she has a legal obligation to provide that journal to law enforcement and counsel when subpoenaed. If she doesn't have an entry for your name at that date and time, that helps us. If she does, and it's false, that also helps us." "What if it's a fake stamp?" Diane asked. Tom smiled without humor. "Then the person who manufactured it has dug themselves a deeper hole. Either way, it's a hole." He flipped to the transfer affidavit and scanned the lines, then sat back. "Do you have children besides your son?" he asked. "No." "Do you have a will?" "Yes. My late husband and I drafted one years ago. It leaves the house to Ethan and a trust for the Arts Center. It also gives him medical power of attorney only if I'm incapacitated. I am not incapacitated." "No," he agreed. "You are irritated. That's different." "Furious," I said. "I prefer you stay irritated," he said kindly. "Fury is expensive and exhausting. Irritation tends to sharpen people." He picked up a pen and began writing the skeleton of our plan on a yellow legal pad, his handwriting elegant and controlled, like someone who learned to write with a fountain pen on paper that mattered. "You should also know," he said, "that people who attempt to take control of a parent's property often prepare the next move while they are still congratulating themselves on the first. It is extremely common for them to file a guardianship petition claiming the parent is incompetent. They do this so that even if the deed gets challenged, they can say a judge should place them in charge of your finances for your own good. They will present affidavits from neighbors and acquaintances claiming you are confused. They will create a story. They already started building it," I said. "They told me I'm confused after anesthesia. They told me not to call a lawyer." Tom nodded as if I had named a cloud. "If a petition appears," he said, "we will be ready. We will collect your medical records from the rehab center and your primary care physician to show baseline cognitive function. We will get statements from your colleagues and neighbors. Dana will begin a file labeled capacity that will, I promise you, be the most boring file in this office because it will contain so much evidence that you are mind-numbingly competent that the judge will have to drink coffee to stay awake." He smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. "May I ask," he added softly, "where is your husband now?" "Gone," I said. 6 years. "Mine too," he said. 3 years and change." He glanced at a plant on the windowsill as if remembering that it needed water. "It is a terrible thing to learn how to be a team of one at our age, but you are a very good team of one. You came here." I surprised myself by wanting to cry. I didn't. Instead, I picked up a ginger cookie and bit into it as if it were the first food I'd eaten that had flavor. We left, and as we stepped onto Duane, the rain the sky had been promising finally started. Gentle at first, then a steady veil. We walked under Diane's umbrella, our steps slow on the wet sidewalk past the window of the bookstore, where a display of cookbooks showed pictures of roasted chickens and apricot tarts. "Do you believe him?" I asked. I do, Diane said, and more importantly, I watched him believe you. That night, I slept badly anyway. Every new sound, the heater clicking on, the rain tapping the window, brought me up from shallow sleep, heart racing. Twice I got out of bed and walked the house, touching the mantel, the kitchen sink, the frame of the door to my studio, reminding my body where it lived. At 3:30 in the morning, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It lit up again. When I finally listened, Vanessa's voice filled the dark. "Sweetheart," she said, syrupy, "it's so late and I can't stop thinking about you. I'm worried you're going to make something simple complicated. We're your family, remember? Ethan is devastated that you're misremembering the signing. He was trying to help. Please don't call a lawyer who will rip us apart for fees. Call me when you wake up. We can fix this without strangers." She paused, then added, "Also at your age, sleep is important for memory. I read a study." I blocked her number. In the morning, Dana called. "Mr. Everett filed the lease pendants," she said, efficient and bright. "The court signed the TRO to prevent any effort to remove you while this is under review. He also drafted a complaint to quiet title. We'll file it today. The district attorney's office asked for your contact information." After I hung up, I made eggs and toast because it was an ordinary thing, and I needed ordinary like water. I had just sat down when someone knocked. The knock was polite. I considered not opening it, but I did. A man in his 30s stood on my porch with a leather portfolio and a rain jacket that probably repelled bullets. He had the posture of a person trained to look non-threatening and the competence to be anything but. He held up a card. "Miss Whitmore? My name is David Klein. I'm an investigator with the Clatsop County District Attorney's Office. May I come in?" He showed me his ID. I let him in because this is America, and the only way to live through some days is to trust a system built by people you will never meet. He sat at my table and took out an invisible recorder disguised as his phone. He asked me to tell him what I told Tom. He asked me to describe the rehab center routines on August 28th. He asked me for permission to pull camera footage from the facility for that day. When he finished, he looked up and said quietly, "I'm sorry this happened to you." I didn't say the obvious thing, which was that I'd been a teacher for 3 decades in a world that didn't always behave itself, and I do not have the energy anymore to be surprised by human choices. He put his card on my table. "Call me if they contact you," he said. "Record everything, keep a log." They contacted me at noon. This time it wasn't a phone call. It was an email with a PDF attached. The subject line said, "Petition for Guardianship." The sender was a law firm I had never heard of with an address in Beaverton and an Instagram account full of smiling families in matching sweaters. The body of the email said, "Dear Miss Whitmore, please be advised that our clients, Ethan and Vanessa Whitmore, have filed a petition for appointment of co-guardians regarding your person and estate in Clatsop County Circuit Court, citing concerns about memory impairment and recent erratic financial decision-making. You will be served with papers shortly. We strongly encourage you to consider accepting a voluntary, limited guardianship to avoid costly litigation. Warm regards, Laura Jensen, ESQ." Diane was standing at my kitchen counter when I read it. I handed her the phone. She made a noise I've only ever heard her make at the news when some elected official does something unspeakable. She poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one like a nurse. I forwarded the email to Donna and called Tom. He picked up on the first ring. "Expected," he said calmly. "It's a script." I could hear keys tapping. "Laura Jensen files a dozen of these a year. Half get withdrawn when the parent shows up with counsel and a cognitive exam score that looks like the SATs. The other half get fought. We'll file an objection today with a motion to dismiss. We'll attach your medical records and letters from colleagues demonstrating capacity. Do you have a primary care physician who can write a declaration?" "Yes, Dr. Cantwell. He's been mine for 15 years. "Good. Dana will contact his office. We'll also include a letter from the rehab center confirming your independent functioning. I wanted to be brave and grown and all the things people write in cards when they tell you to hang in there. Instead, I said, 'Tom, what if a judge doesn't believe me?'" He was silent for a heartbeat and then said, "A judge will believe evidence. We have it. Drink water. Let Diane make you lunch. I'll call in an hour." That afternoon, a sheriff's deputy came to the door and handed me a manila envelope. He did not make eye contact because he is a decent person, and this is how they maintain a distance from other people's pain. Inside were the guardianship papers. The facts attached were a fairy tale written by a person who loved adjectives: confused, forgetful, erratic, paranoid. There were 2 declarations attached from women I vaguely recognized from church bake sales. Both said they'd seen me wandering in Safeway and leaving my cart in the cereal aisle, as if that were a sign of dementia, rather than the condition of being human in America in a grocery store in 2024. Diane read them and muttered, "We need to invite them to the next faculty meeting at the high school and see who wanders first." I should have laughed. I didn't. I felt something inside me go cold and dense, not because I thought the judge would believe them, because my son did. I went to my studio. The canvas at the easel was the mouth of the Columbia, but the light in my head had changed. The morning I started it, the sky in the painting was a gentle wash. I picked up a thin brush and loaded it with blue that holds gray like a secret. I pulled the brush across the canvas and watched the water shift from hopeful to dangerous. I put my hand on the table to steady the tremor that had nothing to do with my hip. Tom kept his word. He filed the objection and the motion to dismiss. He asked the court for an expedited hearing given the property issue. We received a date for the guardianship hearing 3 weeks out. In the meantime, the TRO held, and Redwood Meridian paused their plans. After their counsel sent Tom a letter making a courtesy request that I vacate to allow them to take possession. Tom's reply was 3 lines long and all concrete. In the days that followed, our world narrowed to errands we had never imagined running. Dana walked me through signing medical record releases and HIPAA forms that looked like they could submit a spaceship to NASA. Dr. Cantwell wrote a letter so crisp and plain, it felt like a slap to the face of anyone who could read and wanted to lie. Miss Whitmore shows no signs of cognitive impairment. She manages her ADLs and IADLs independently. She is oriented ×3. Her mild cognitive screen score, 29/30ths. The point I missed was the one where he asked what day it was, and I said Wednesday when it was Thursday, because I hate calendars. Diane pulled together letters from the Arts Center board and 3 former colleagues who would have testified under oath that I kept a high school art program running on a budget that required me to adopt stray brushes from the dollar store. They wrote about the mural we painted with seniors on the side of the auto parts store when the city wouldn't give us a wall, and about the way my classroom smelled like burnt toast from the kiln and pencil shavings, and kids who weren't ready to give up. The investigator from the DA's office called to say the rehab center had security footage and a digital sign-in showing that on August 28th at 3:45 p.m., I had been in the therapy room learning to put on a sock with a plastic contraption, like a device from a bad infomercial. He sounded almost cheerful when he said it, like a fisherman who saw the shape of a salmon in the water. Diane took me to Fred Meyer for groceries. In the produce aisle, 2 women I know from church stepped sideways as if my presence were contagious. I pretended to be deeply interested in cucumbers. The lights over the greens buzzed. When we got home, someone had put a flyer under my doormat. I recognized Vanessa's style, the dainty font, the pastel background, the way she wields lowercase letters like a sword. It said, "Please pray for our family in this difficult time. Our dear Helen is struggling with memory issues. We love her so much. We are trying to do what's best." There was a photo of me from last year at Thanksgiving, my mouth open mid-speech as if I were confused. Ethan stood behind me with his hand on my shoulder, looking down at me like a benevolent prince. I brought the flyer into the kitchen and set it on fire over the sink. A week before the hearing, Tom called and said, "We found something." He sounded almost pleased. It frightened me that he could sound pleased about anything connected to my son. Then I was grateful, because someone ought to be able to approach this like a job that can be done, not a loss being grieved. Redwood Meridian wired funds to an account in your name the same day the deed recorded, he said. The account is not yours. We subpoenaed the bank. It's at an online institution with a P.O. box in Beaverton as the address. The account holder used your social security number. How much? I asked, my mouth dry. $275,000, he said. the purchase price minus closing costs. It appears that the money moved out of that account in 3 transactions. One to a limited liability company co-owned by your son's wife, one to an investment platform, and one to a vendor that appears to be an interior design company. An interior design company, I said. Some people armor themselves with furniture, Tom said. If you ever get tempted to envy Vanessa, remember that. I stood at my window and looked at my front yard, the dogwood leaves beginning to turn the color of rust. I whispered, "My son?" Tom was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Yes," he said. "What happens at the hearing?" I asked. "We will present evidence to dismiss the guardianship petition as frivolous and retaliatory," he said. "We will also ask the judge to consolidate with the civil matter so that the evidentiary record can be considered in both. The district attorney may file a separate criminal complaint for forgery and identity theft if they choose. That is not our doing. Our path stays focused. Title, safety, sanity. Can you live with that?" "I can," I said, although the only thing I truly believed I could do in that moment was keep standing. The night before court, Diane slept on my couch. Not because she thought someone would come, though it wouldn't have surprised either of us if Vanessa staged a midnight doorstep confessional for her followers, but because friendship sometimes looks like breathing in the same house for 7 hours while you both pretend to sleep. I lay awake and watched the streetlight crawl along my ceiling. I thought about the first time I brought my son into this house. He was 2 days old and weighed barely 7 pounds. My husband carried him over the threshold the way you carry a paper bag you're terrified of breaking. He grew up in this house, streaking mud onto the kitchen floor after Little League, practicing his cursive at this table that is now grotesquely evidence. The first time he brought Vanessa here, she stood on the porch and said, "It's cute," which I should have heard the way the ocean hears a harbor. Distance, not welcome. We woke before dawn. We dress the way you dress when you know strangers will look at you and make a decision about your life based on your shoes. I wore the cardigan my husband bought me the Christmas we got snow. It is soft and blue and still smells like him if I imagine hard enough. Diane wore her "I'm grading papers" dress, with pockets so deep she could hide entire students in them. Tom met us at the courthouse steps. He wore a gray suit that didn't bother with being impressive. He walked between us and we moved through the metal detector like people entering a plane, holding our breath, surrendered to a system that pretends it can count everything. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. They almost always are. The judge was a man in his 50s, serious, clean-shaven, hair clipped short like someone who makes a point of being sensible. His nameplate said Honorable David Anthony. On the other side of the room, Ethan and Vanessa sat at a table with a young woman in a navy suit who looked like she could sell you a mortgage and then sing the solo in the church choir. Ethan's face looked gaunt and older than last month. Vanessa looked camera-ready, pearl studs, hair like something embargoed until after an election. When my son saw me, his eyes flickered. He looked quickly away. A scene from childhood rose up uninvited. Ethan at 5, face sticky with jam, looking at me after he fed the dog half a jar of preserves and saying, "He was hungry, Mommy," hands up to keep truth at bay. The judge called the case. The lawyer in navy stood and introduced herself. Laura Jensen for the petitioners. Her tone was pleasant with the faint stainless sound of someone who sleeps every night with white noise. Tom stood. Thomas Everett for Miss Whitmore, along with Dana West, my paralegal. The judge nodded. Miss Jensen began in a voice that could have sold a life insurance policy to a tree. "Your Honor, this is a tragic situation," she said. "No one wants to be here, least of all my clients, who love Miss Whitmore dearly and have gone above and beyond to support her. But we have grave concerns." She laid out their narrative like a sheet over a piece of furniture they didn't want anyone to see clearly. She said I'd become forgetful. She said the rehab center staff had noted confusion. She said I had a long pattern of impulsive financial decisions, a phrase so lazy and cruel I felt it rise in me like bile. She referred to neighbors who had observed me wandering. She said my son had discovered large checks written to charity without consultation, as if charity were a diagnosis. She said I had a history of falls, as if gravity proved incompetence. Tom waited. He did not object or interrupt. He let the room become heavy with their version of me, the sort of weight that begs to be lifted. When it was his turn, he walked to the lectern with a single yellow folder. He said, "Your Honor, we all know what this is." He didn't smile. The petition is a retaliatory maneuver, filed days after my client discovered that her sole residence had been transferred without her knowledge using a notarization that did not occur. The court has already granted a TRO protecting her from removal, and AE lis pendens has been filed. The district attorney's office is investigating the deed. In the meantime, Miss Whitmore's capacity is not in question. He handed the judge a stack of papers. Dr. Cantwell's letter, the rehab center's letter, the cognitive screen, letters from colleagues, a photograph of the studio in the back room with canvases lining up like choir members waiting their turn. He did not submit the Safeway affidavits because he is not cruel. The judge took his time. He read, or at least looked like he was reading, which in a courtroom is almost the same thing. Miss Jensen called Ethan first. He walked to the witness stand like a man approaching a dock after jumping into cold water, shaky and disbelieving. He looked at me once, then stopped looking at me at all. She led him through a series of questions. He said he loved me. He said he worried about me. He said I'd called him at midnight, crying because I couldn't remember if the oven was on. It was 6 years ago. My husband had just died, and I didn't trust empty rooms yet. He said the house was old and had stairs. "And the signatures?" Miss Jensen asked, carefully neutral. "To your knowledge, did your mother sign the documents voluntarily?" "Yes," he said. "We sat at her table. I explained it. She wanted to be safe." Tom stood. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "who arranged the notary for the deed?" Ethan hesitated. "Our agent handled it," he said. "Your agent being yourself as the listing agent." A flush. "I mean the buyer's agent. Did you personally observe a notary meet with your mother on August 28th at 3:45 p.m. and verify her identity?" He swallowed. "No." "Do you know whether your mother left the rehab facility that day?" "No." "Do you know who notarized the document?" He looked at Miss Jensen, then down at his hands. "A woman named Carla," he said finally. "Carla who?" "Brooke." Tom let the name hang in the air. "Mr. Whitmore, are you aware that your mother's cognitive screen last week scored 29 out of 30? Silence. "Are you aware that the rehab center's records show she participated fully in occupational and physical therapy, managed her medication regimen, and demonstrated full orientation?" He was breathing hard now, the way he does when he used to run the Riverwalk and insisted he wasn't tired. "Are you aware," Tom said, his voice soft, "that your wife opened a bank account in your mother's name the day before closing, and that the proceeds of the sale were wired into that account and moved out within hours to a company your wife co-owns?" Miss Jensen objected. "Relevance." "Capacity bears on motive," Tom said. "The petitioners have framed this as an act of love. We are entitled to test the narrative." "Overruled," the judge said, sounding tired. Ethan's face did a thing I will not forget until I forget my own name. It tried on new shapes, as if he were auditioning for the role of a son in a tragedy he did not write. Then he said the worst thing possible. He said Vanessa handled that, as if saying her name were an exorcism and not an admission. Tom didn't look at Vanessa. He turned to the judge. "No further questions." Miss Jensen called Vanessa. She glided to the stand like the room was a runway. She took the oath with her eyes lowered, lashes demure. The jury box was empty, but if it had been full, she would have played to it. "Mrs. Whitmore," Miss Jensen said, "how would you describe your relationship with Helen?" "She's my second mother," Vanessa said, and let herself look at me with a tremor in her voice, like she might cry. "I adore her. She knows this." "And your concerns?" "She's not safe alone," she said. "She forgets things. She called me from the grocery store once because she couldn't find her car. I almost spoke. I almost said, 'The car battery died and you were at yoga.' But I didn't." Tom put a hand lightly on the table like an anchor. Did you ever attempt to profit from this situation? Miss Jensen asked, choosing the easiest question. Absolutely not, she said, sitting straighter. Any funds I moved were to secure them until we could get Mom set up comfortably. Tom rose, and when he walked toward her, I watched the room change temperature a degree. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, do you have a business called Veil and Vine Interiors, LLC? Yes, she said brightly. It's a design consulting firm. Do you own it alone? No, with a friend. Is your friend's name Vanessa Porter? She blinked. Yes. Did Veil and Vine receive a wire transfer in the amount of $81,000 2 hours after the sale proceeds from the Magnolia Street property were deposited into an account created with my client's social security number? She held her smile like a tray full of drinks. We received a retainer, she said, to begin work on the new place. We wanted to make sure Helen had something beautiful. From whom did you receive the retainer? She paused. From Helen. From an account that Helen had never seen, never signed for, and never authorized? That's your interpretation, she said sweetly. Is it also my interpretation, Tom said, that both you and your husband texted Miss Whitmore within the hour of sale to reassure her that you handled the insurance paperwork and that she now had options? She glanced at Miss Jensen, who was leafing through her notes so quickly something could have caught fire. We were communicating, Vanessa said. Families do that. Is it your interpretation that at 3:45 p.m. on August 28th, while a notary in Portland recorded that she witnessed my client's signature, my client was captured on video in a therapy room at Columbia River Rehabilitation, learning to use a sock aid? A muscle in Vanessa's jaw ticked. I can't speak to that, but you can speak to this, Tom said, holding up the printed flyer we had found stuck under my doormat. Did you distribute these around town? Her eyes flicked to it and back to him. We asked for prayers. For a woman who passed a cognitive screen with a near-perfect score. Maybe God did that, she said softly. I think I laughed then. A short, shocked sound that made Diane's hand shoot toward mine under the table. Tom didn't laugh. He simply said, no further questions. The judge leaned back. He steepled his fingers like a person in an illustration about patience. He read his notes, then looked up. Here's what we have, he said. We have a petition that appears to have been filed in response to litigation over a questionable property transfer. We have allegations of confusion and impairment countered by robust medical evidence to the contrary. We have the involvement of law enforcement regarding the deed. We have a TRO and a lease pendants. We have two people who believe it is in their mother's best interest to be under their control, and a mother who believes otherwise. He took off his glasses and set them on the bench. The petition for guardianship is denied, he said, with prejudice, which means you may not file it again absent a material change in circumstances and leave of this court. You will not use this court as a tool to gain advantage in a property dispute. Miss Whitmore retains full authority over her person and estate. Miss Jensen started to speak. He lifted his hand and she stopped. I will also note, he said, that this court expects parties in family disputes to refrain from public campaigns designed to pressure or shame. If I see any further flyers or social media posts representing speculation as medical fact, I will entertain sanctions. He put his glasses back on and looked at Tom. The title matter will proceed on its own calendar. Counsel, if the district attorney files, coordinate to avoid duplication of effort. He banged the gavel because even in small rooms, ritual matters. We went outside into an afternoon that had decided to be generous. The rain slowed to a mist that felt like breath. We stood on the courthouse steps and looked at the river because sometimes the only thing you can do with good news is point your face at something bigger than you are. Diane touched my elbow. Are you okay? No, I said. And then, yes. And then, I don't know. Tom stood slightly apart, giving me the grace of not being watched while I tried to be a person again. When he turned, his face was lighter by half an ounce. Go home, he said gently. Let Diane make soup. I'll call if I hear from the DA. We will schedule depositions for Redwood Meridian's people and the notary. The notary will be interesting. She was, when we met her 2 weeks later in a conference room with fluorescent lights that hum and a fake fern in a corner that fools no one. Carla Brooke was younger than I expected, with glitter on her fingernails and a canvas tote that said, "Nevertheless, she persisted." She wore a scarf that looked expensive and a face that looked tired. Tom didn't ask her to take the oath because this wasn't a courtroom. He simply laid the notary journal in front of her, the one her counsel reluctantly produced after the subpoena, and said, "Please show us the entry for August 28th at 3:45 p.m. for the notarization of Miss Whitmore's signature." She flipped. Her fingers shook faintly. The pages were filled with cramped cursive and small rectangles for thumbprints. "There," she said, and pointed to a line. It had my name. The ID box said, "Oregon driver's license." The fee box said, $10. The signature in the signature box looked like mine, except it wasn't. The thumbprint was a smudge that could have been anybody. "Where did this notarization occur?" Tom asked. She swallowed. "My office." "Address." She gave a Portland street. "And who presented this woman to you?" "I don't remember," she said too quickly. "People come in all day." "Did you look at her ID yourself?" "Yes," she said, and then when Tom just looked at her, I must have." "Did you compare the photograph to the person in front of you?" "Yes," she said, and her voice forgot how to be smooth. Tom slid a sheet across the table, a still photograph from the rehab center showing me on August 28th at 3:45 p.m., hair pulled back, wearing a gray t-shirt, a physical therapist leaning over me, holding a strap for my foot. "This is Miss Whitmore at the time you say you personally examined her ID," he said. Carla stared. Her mouth opened and closed. "I need a break," she whispered. When she came back, her lawyer's face was the color of ash. Carla looked down at her hands. "A woman came in with a man," she said softly. "She had your name on a clipboard and a driver's license. Look, we were slammed. I didn't think—" "Describe the woman," Tom said. "Blonde," Carla said. "Pretty. Like one of those women who sell makeup on TV. Very put together. The man did most of the talking." "Did you compare the photograph to the person?" "I glanced," she whispered. "It was busy." She began to cry then, not the kind of crying that comes with sorrow, but the kind that comes with a furious, deep shame, when you realize your small laziness fits perfectly inside someone else's bigger crime. The DA filed 2 weeks later, identity theft, forgery, and notarial misconduct charges against the notary as a misdemeanor, and charges against Ethan and Vanessa that sounded like the criminal code sneezed. Aggravated identity theft, theft by deception, forgery in the second degree. I did not cheer. I felt like throwing up. This was my child. The civil case proceeded like an orderly parade of awful facts. Redwood Meridian tried to argue that they were an innocent purchaser for value and that I should seek my remedy against my son. Tom reminded the court that an innocent purchaser is not protected if the underlying deed is void ab initio, which is Latin for "from the beginning," which is what I would paint on my studio door if I were the kind of person who paints door signs. The judge in the civil case was a woman with hair the color of steel and a gaze that could undo a knot just by looking at it. She listened to testimony about stamps and signatures and bank wires as if she were kneading dough in her mind, turning each fact until it felt the right texture. In the end, she wrote an order that read like a recipe for sanity. The quitclaim deed recorded on September 1st was void ab initio due to fraudulent notarization and lack of grantor consent. Title quieted in fee simple absolute to me. The lies pendens lifted when the judgment recorded. Redwood Meridian was to recover from the Whitmores, not me. The defendants were to pay my attorney fees. The court referred the matter of the forged account to the DA. The court admonished Ethan and Vanessa for misuse of guardianship procedures. She did not scold them. She did not have to. The words did it for her. I went home to my house. I stood on my porch where the men had measured for a ramp no one asked for, and touched the column my husband sanded smooth the summer before we learned his heart was larger than it should be in all the wrong ways. I put my palm there and felt the grain under the paint, the layers of years. People expect that the next part of this story is joy. It is not. It is relief. Joy comes later, like dessert in a house where we've had to rebuild the kitchen. The next part of the story is paperwork. It is Tom bringing documents for me to sign that unwind the knots. It is Dana showing me where to sign and sticky noting the parts that matter. It is the DA's office checking in and asking if I would be willing to testify if the case went to trial. It is me saying yes, because we did not walk this far to stop at the corner. It is also quiet. Diane watering my plants when I forget. The sound of the dishwasher, the rhythm of the river. 3 months later, Ethan called. The restraining order the judge signed as part of the civil judgment allowed communications for purposes of reconciliation, if initiated by me, not him. He called anyway. His number flashed and I stared at it until voicemail took it. I listened because motherhood is a disease I will have until I die. Mom, he said. He sounded older and small. I know I'm not supposed to call, but I wanted you to know Vanessa left. She says I ruined everything. Maybe I did. God, I wish I could explain. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought I could make it right before you ever saw it. I thought we'd sell and set you up and everyone would be happy. And then the market dipped and Vanessa panicked and I don't know how to be the person I was in your classroom watching you hang student art and thinking my mother can make anything beautiful. He cried, the way he cried when he broke his wrist in 6th grade and told me he wasn't afraid, but he was. I'm sorry, he said. It doesn't fix a thing. I just wanted you to hear it. I did not call him back. It is astonishing what we can do when we stop practicing rescue. 6 months later, Tom and I stood on my porch while he showed me how difficult it is to make something look easy. We had spent those months in a rhythm that surprised me with its humanity amid the paperwork and the procedural calendars. He came by on Tuesdays with forms and a lemon bar from the coffee shop on 12th because he had discovered I liked lemon better than chocolate. He brought me a book about American lighthouses and said, if you're going to live on a coast and survive it, you should be friends with boats. Sometimes we talked about the case. Sometimes we talked about our dead. He told me about his wife, Ellen, who collected wind chimes and cried when he burned the first batch of English muffins he tried to make alone. I told him about the day I hung my husband's jacket back in the closet and thought, he will need that in October, and then remembered October would come without him. When the judgment recorded and the title quieted, when the last check from Redwood Meridian arrived to reimburse my legal fees, when Dana brought champagne for the office and sparkling cider for me because she knows I don't drink much, Tom came to my porch and looked at the river like he belonged there. I should say goodbye, he said. You should say see you, I said. He smiled, and it changed his face in a way that made me understand how his wife fell in love with him 39 years ago. See you, he said. He turned to go, then hesitated. Helen, he said. And he said my name like the first part of a sentence he'd been forming for months. You are allowed to build a new routine that has something beautiful in it that did not exist before any of this. I have my painting, I said. You do, he said. And you have a porch where someone could drink tea on a Sunday afternoon if you asked them. The river moved past us as if we were stones. Would you like tea on Sunday? I asked, my voice steady, my hands steady. Yes, he said simply. I would. On Sunday, we had tea. We drank it from the mugs my husband and I bought at the art fair in June of a year that will not be back. We sat on the porch with the sun on our knees. He told me his daughter in Spokane had a new baby with hair like dandelion fluff. I told him my student Amy, who used to cut math class to sit in my room and draw palm trees, had sent me a postcard from Miami saying she found a wall with her name on it. We did not kiss. We did not rush the door to the future. We sat and drank tea and watched a tugboat push a barge upriver, and if that isn't romance at 70, I don't know what is. I painted again. The canvas I had scoured with storm tightened into a new thing under my hand. The sky in the painting learned how to let morning in again, not because the world deserved it, but because light is not a moral choice. I called the painting Freedom. Diane said, "You're not subtle." And I said, "Not anymore." One afternoon in March, 6 months and a day after the judge said the words that gave me my name back, I stood in the studio stroking a thin line of white into the crest of a wave when I heard footsteps on the porch. Tom doesn't knock like that. Diane knocks like she's the cavalry. This was a knock you do when you do not know if the person on the other side of the door will bite. I opened the door. Ethan stood on my step. He had lost weight. His hair looked like he cut it in the mirror with scissors and forgot the back. He held his hands awkwardly like a teenage boy. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," he said. "I'm sorry. The order ends next week, but I couldn't wait. We can talk on the porch," I said. He glanced past me into the house, and the old muscle memory of being my child flickered in his face. How many meals he ate at that table. How many nights he kicked his shoes off by the door, the exact sound the stairs make on the third riser. He sat on the top step, and I sat in the chair. It was sunny but cool. A gull wheeled and scolded something invisible. "I'm in a group," he said. "I go Tuesday and Thursday nights. They call it amends when you try to do this. I thought amends meant you bring people something. I brought you something. It's just paper." He held out an envelope. It was from a bank. Inside, a cashier's check, a memo line that read restitution, an amount that made my breath catch. "It's all I have." "You owe more," I said gently. "I do," he said. "It will take me years." "It will take me a lifetime," I said, not unkindly, because we both understood that some debts have nothing to do with money. He nodded. "I know no apology reaches you from here," he said, and tapped his chest with 2 fingers. "I know that the apology needs to live in my feet and my hands for a long time, and you will decide if you ever want to see it. I wanted to tell you I'm trying." "Are you safe?" I asked. "Because in the end, I am still his mother." "I am," he said. "She left. It was better. For both of us. I sleep. I work day jobs. I make coffee at 5 a.m. and steam milk for people who are mean to me, and I say, 'Have a nice day.' And sometimes I mean it. I go to the river and run until I want to die, and then I don't. I remember who you were when I was little and think she doesn't deserve this version of me." "No one does," I said. It was not a rebuke. It was a fact, and he took it like a man takes a fact when he has decided to become one. "Can I hug you?" he asked, surprising me and himself. "Not today," I said, and he nodded as if he needed me to draw the line so he could see it and not trip. He stood. "I'll go," he said. "I need to be at work at noon." "Ethan," I said, and his name felt like a note in a song I hadn't sung in a while. "I hope you learn to be kind to yourself. You will never be the man you were. That is true for all of us, but you can be the man you choose." He swallowed. "I'm trying." When he walked down the steps, his shoulders were not quite as curved as when he arrived. He did not look back. That was good. Spring came. The dogwood opened its white hands. I did not leave town. People sometimes ask why I didn't sell and start over somewhere new, where the memory of betrayal did not walk past my grocery cart. The answer is not dramatic. It is this: I love my house. The light in the studio is right at 3 o'clock. The porch holds the sun at 9 in the morning, just the way a palm holds water. The floors creak the way they creaked when my husband walked barefoot to the kitchen to drink milk at midnight because he believed it cured heartburn. I taught 30 years of children in this town how to look at a line and see a horizon. I am not the one who has to leave. Tom comes on Sundays. Sometimes he brings a book for me, sometimes a plant for the sill. He never brings pity. We talk about the cases he's taken. He does more now, pro bono, gray-haired crusades into places where sons practice forgery and daughters sell rings they didn't buy. He calls it a hobby the way some men call fly fishing a hobby. You could make a living, I tease. He shrugs. I have a pension, he says. I have a porch. We sit. We drink tea. Sometimes we touch hands, sometimes we don't. We are careful with each other, not because we are breakable, but because we have learned how unkind the world can be when it decides to practice carelessness. I paint. People ask why I tell this story. They say, "You won. Let it go." But this is America, and the way we remember is by speaking the thing we didn't know we needed to hear. We say out loud that greed can dress itself up in family. We say, with our mouths and our hands and our pages, that you are allowed to be 70 and furious and go to court and demand your name back. We say because it matters, that it is not too late to learn the shape of your own signature again. to draw it slowly and admire the way the letters keep their line. One morning in June, I went down to the water with my sketchbook. The fishermen were out early, rain hats like small ships. A boy in a red hoodie sat on the dock with his feet dangling over the river, casting into a world he believed would hand him something if he just waited long enough. The air smelled like salt and damp wood and promise. I drew. Later on my porch, Tom put his hand over mine and said, "What will you call this one?" "The signature I never wrote," I said. He looked at my lines. "It's beautiful," he said. And he was right. Not because the drawing was perfect, but because I had chosen it. At dusk, the lights downriver blinked on. The dogwood leaves made a lace against the gray. I thought of all the women who will never get the luxury of a lawyer with time, a friend with a tote bag, a judge with a spine. I thought of the ones who will, and I whispered a prayer. Not the pretty kind, but the grounded kind, where you ask for the world to be rearranged around a truth. We are not disposable. We are not confused because someone wants us to be. We are here. We are steady. We are learning to belong to ourselves. I went inside and made tea. When I carried the mug back through the studio, I paused in the doorway. The painting on the easel caught the last light like a promise. The river calm, the horizon clean. A tugboat, small and sturdy, pulling something heavier than itself and doing it anyway. I stood in that doorway and breathed and said to the empty room, to my husband somewhere in the deepness, to the son I once rocked in my arms and the man he might become, to the friend who never let go of the rope, to the lawyer who decided to be a lighthouse in a town that didn't ask for one, to the woman I am now and the girl I will never be again. I am home.